Hey, what's up guys? Jake with Legacy 4x4 here with Brittany, and today we're going to do a nice little video and just do a shop tour of my home automotive fabrication shop that I've got here at my house. Should be fun. The idea here is to show y'all that you really don't need much to build the kind of trucks that we build. It's mostly just about your attitude and about taking the time to do things right and to do them the first time. And then with a few good tools, you can pretty much make whatever you want. Anyways, let's go and get started. Alright, so before we get going, I figured I'd just talk about the overall specifications of my shop. My shop is not very large. When I initially purchased this house a little over a year ago, the original shop was 16 feet wide and 24 feet deep. Since then, I have now extended my shop to be a total of 16 feet wide and then 40 feet deep, adding a lot of extra square footage to the back of the shop, which gives me ample space to do what it is that I do. My shop is also only 10 feet tall, which is obviously not ideal when you're building big trucks, especially not when you're doing a lot of tube work and you're starting to bend really large pieces of tube that kind of like go up into the rafters and places like that, which is kind of irritating to work with. A lot of times I end up pulling the tube roller outside in order to use it out there so that I don't have anything blocking the bending of those tubes. But anyways, like I said, this is not an outrageous shop. Like I said, 16 feet by 40 feet is not very big. It's not like a lot of big shops that you see a lot of guys have. And it's plenty of space to do what we do though, as long as you're only working on about one truck at a time. I really don't have room in here to have more than one truck and then have adequate fabrication space for the rest of the stuff and storage space. So if you're planning a shop or if you're planning on kind of like starting out or anything like this, you really got to take into consideration not only the space you need for the truck and the space to work, but the space for storage. Parts, tools, and other things just really add up really quickly, and they just eat up a lot of your usable space once you start putting 6-foot tool chests in here. You got your refrigerators, your table saws, all that other stuff. Once you're getting all those things there, it really takes up a lot of space away from what you have to fabricate on.
Yep. Good.
All right, so you guys can see the very first thing in my shop when you come to it from the front through the main garage door is gonna be my workspace for the vehicle. There's enough space here to have a full-size rig. My F-150 does fit in here. Granted, it's a little bit longer, so it takes a little bit more room than the Willys does, but you can fit a full-size truck in this space that I have right here. I've got a standard size garage door at the front, a 7x9, very normal for most residential type places. And then the truck goes right on the other side of it, giving me ample room to work on any portion of the vehicle at any time. To my left, your right of the Willys, we have just storage on the right-hand side over there. I use that to store my long pieces of tube. There's enough of these little J-hook hangers that I picked up at Harbor Freight that you can hang a full 20-foot stick of tube up there. Usually I just store 10-foot sticks of tube up there and anything that fits between at least two of the different hangers. There is space for shorter stuff underneath the wall, kind of in between the different studs, for anything that's too short to fit between any of the hangers. And then anything that's very short, about a foot or less, goes underneath the welding table, as you'll see here in a second.
Can I help you? Yes, ma'am? No, don't be rude. Yes, ma'am? Yes, ma'am? All right. Yep. Good.
All right, so starting out over here, kind of at the front left corner of my shop, I use this for storage for tools that don't get used very frequently. This is a good spot to put them because they don't take up a whole lot of space, and it gives me the freedom to work on the truck that's next to them. And if I ever need to use these tools, I typically move them to the back fabrication section if the need arises to use these. So behind me here, I keep my floor jack, I keep my wheel dollies that I use to push a vehicle around if necessary, my jack stands. Right here, I keep the Rogue Fab tube bender. This is obviously one of my favorite tools. I use it in a ton of different videos. This thing works really well. If you're looking for a tube bender, this is by far probably the best one you can buy for your money. This thing works phenomenally. It's air over hydraulic and it's super easy to use and kind of a fun project to put it together, especially if you're just getting into welding. This was one of the first things I did when I was building the Commando and one of the first real big welding projects I ever started, prior to obviously working on the entirety of that Jeep. So this is a really valuable tool. I like it quite a bit. Below it, I keep a small little storage chest that I keep most of my different dies and my tools that are specifically for this, so I don't have to run to other portions of the shop to get a tool that I know that I need to work with the Rogue Fab. Next to the Rogue Fab back here, I do keep my Rogue Versatube notcher. That thing is also super sweet. Again, it's also made by Rogue Fabrication, but if you want to notch tubes, specifically if you're doing a lot of the same type of tubes over and over again, this thing makes really quick works of tubes. and it's a very valuable tool to have in the shop. I use this a lot in other videos as well. Next to the Rogue Fab, I do keep my Dewalt Table Saw. I don't use the table saw very often. I only bought it when I was doing my shop extension, but every now and again it does come in handy, so I don't see a reason to get rid of it, and I just keep that kind of tucked up out of the way next to my cutoff table. All right, so right next to that storage section that y'all just saw here, to the right of my Rogue Fab, I keep my, basically this is like my cutting station. It's also my old welding table. Again, this is one of the first few projects I ever did, was building this table. It's okay. It's not as good, obviously, as my new Certiflat table that you'll see later, but it did its purpose. It worked well enough while I had it, and I really enjoyed the project, and it's kind of a fun first big thing to build. On top of this, I keep my Slugger Chop Saw here. This is, again, another awesome tool. Again, it's a little expensive, but it's definitely worth its weight in gold when you start to talk about the precision of the cuts that it can make and the speed that it can make those cuts. I love using this thing. I always keep a few extra blades on hand. That way if I ever do burn through one, I've always got a spare one sitting there. So I got the Slugger Chop Saw there. And the top of this table really does become like my catch-all table. As I'm working on projects or I'm doing something, this is where I throw all of the parts. This is where I throw my tools. This is where I store random stuff. This is like my random horizontal surface that always gets covered up with stuff as I'm working on things. But it's a useful surface to have. Underneath the Slugger, I've got two old tool chests. I've since upgraded to different ones throughout the rest of the shop, but these are some of my old original ones that I first had in my garage. Inside of these tool chests, I keep a variety of things. Mostly it's different accessories for either the Slugger or any of my grinders or any random stuff that doesn't really have a home somewhere else. It's all the tools that you would need to do any kind of cutting and a lot of the fabrication work, such as drill bits, fixturing tools, clamps. All of that stuff is stored in these boxes down here, out of the way, and when I need them, I just come over here and grab what I need from this box here. On top of the boxes, I've got a little bit of space between where the toolbox is in and the table starts, and I usually just put my grinders down there, kind of out of the way with the cord stuck behind them behind the table, and if I need one, I just come by and grab whichever one I need and pull it out and use it for that. Next to that welding table, I do have a conventional regular home oven. This is an oven I picked up for about $40 here locally to me. It's old and dirty, but it works for powder coating, which is pretty much the only thing I use it for at this point. As you can see, my brother-in-law is still here and he's helping me shoot this video, and he's got that little French bulldog that's been visiting too. And the little Frenchie likes to try to bully my much larger Carolina mutt that we've got here, but it's all in good fun. Anyways, below the fridge, I made this stand to mount all of these Harbor Freight boxes. These are the little $9 boxes you can get from Harbor Freight that look a little bit like fishing tackle boxes. I use these boxes to store a random assortment of different small parts, bolts, nuts, fuses, electrical wiring pieces, the random things that you always collect. So I built this because I had a habit of just placing things on surfaces or throwing them in a box and never being able to find what I needed. I've got a total of 10 of these different Harbor Freight boxes that I use to organize and sort all of my things, and then all of the larger stuff gets stored on a shelf in the back of the shop.
Yeah. All right, you're good.
All right, so here we've got my larger of my toolboxes. This was actually a gift from my wife a couple years ago for, I think, my birthday, if I remember correctly. She got me both the top and bottom for this tool chest that I've got here. This is the 72-inch wide Craftsman one that you can buy at Lowe's. I dig the red color, and it's actually a really good set of drawers for what I needed to use. All the drawers are soft close and they work really well. In this I store most of my mechanics kind of tools, not very many of my fabrication tools, but a lot of like your wrenches, your screwdrivers, your sockets, all of the other random stuff that you need in order to do this kind of work goes into these tool chests. I keep my drills in here and all of that stuff, my hammers, etc. This is kind of my catch-all for the majority of my non-specialty type tools goes in here. Also up top here, I run all of my batteries through the included USB charger that's up here. There's a little power outlet connected to the top of this box that's plugged in behind it. And I run all of my batteries up here, all in one consolidated location, so I know where they're all at and I know their status at all times. You have to collect a lot of tools just to do this kind of work, so you need a place to put them all, unless you just want them on the floor like how Matt lives his life. Up above it, I do have my TV. Again, this is a TV we took out of the house. We replaced the one in our living room, and I got to take it out here and use it in the shop now for myself. All right, so coming back here to the kind of the fabrication portion of my shop, this is where I do the vast majority of my actual work, and as I finish a product, it then goes onto the vehicle or onto whatever it is I'm working on at the time. As you can see behind me here, Brittany is a huge supporter back here. She loves being outside, and she's totally not just passed out on the back of the concrete after playing with Moose all afternoon. To my right, you can see that I've got my Hobart 210 Mvp Welder. This is not by any means a professional or super fancy welder. You can get these things for less than $1,000 at a lot of your big box stores, but this thing has served me well over the years and has built several trucks and done several different other projects for different people over the years. To the left of the welder, I do keep the cherry picker just kind of out of the way in the folded up and down position, kind of tucked up back there where it doesn't really get in the way of anything else. My trash can is just below the welder there, and then that's obviously where the beers and everything else goes as we work on projects. To my left here, you can see my big welding table. This originally started out as a 2 foot by 5 foot Certiflat welding table, and I have recently added on these 1 foot extensions on the left and right side of it. I hope to one day add on wings to the front of it as well to really increase the size of my welding table overall. On the corner of the welding table, I keep my vise. Again, just another cheap little vise that you can get anywhere. It's a 4-inch vise. It swivels and rotates and all that kind of stuff, but pretty straightforward, and it's come in handy for more than a few things. Underneath the welding table, if you buy one of these from Certiflat, it does not come with this little rack that I built below it, but I just built a super simple rack using a couple extra pieces of 2x2 box tubing and then some expanded metal that I had available to me. On top of that rack, I use cat litter boxes to store all of my different shortcuts of metal like I was talking about at the start of this video. So anything that's under 12 inches usually ends up in one of these boxes, and I try to separate it by what type of metal it is, whether it's angle iron, box tubing, or circular tubing. All right, so I forgot to mention, but hanging up on the wall here, I have an intercom system that reaches inside my house that my wife got me for Christmas last year. She does not like coming out to the shop all the time because it's usually loud and it's usually messy and smells weird, and so she generally tries to stay inside. So she got me this intercom system, and the other receiver is inside the house. That way she can gently tell me that it's time for dinner and that I need to come inside and come do some other kind of project. So we're right there with you. But well, hey, we're shooting a shop tour video. Yeah, Declan's helping me shoot all the B-roll and fucking coaching me a little bit, so.
Okay.
All right, so here in the back corner of my shop, this is what I was talking about earlier. You gotta account for space to store all the random stuff that you accumulate. I've got a 4 foot wide, 6 foot tall shelf back here. It's got a total of 5 different subsections to it. And this is where I store all of the big stuff and all the random stuff that you just accumulate over time. I've been slowly putting things in these red boxes like this to try to keep it a little bit organized, but as you can see, it usually ends up just being a pile of stuff in the corner, but it's kept out of the way and it doesn't bother my progress throughout the rest of the shop. And if I ever really need to find something, I can usually find it back here, or I just buy more of them, whatever. All right, so next to that clutter corner, I keep my Ortor Laser Master 2 sitting on that stand that I made. And again, there's a whole video for that if you wanted to see a rundown of that whole laser. And there's also a new door scan video out where we use this laser for the first time. Next to that laser, I have another one of those Craftsman tool chests. This one's a little bit shorter. It's the 56-inch one, I believe. I literally bought this because I needed another table to run my 2 computers on, to have a top surface to work from, and I didn't like a lot of the commercially available table options, and I figured having the extra storage was going to be worth it. Inside this tool chest, I keep random different parts for the laser. I keep some fabrication tools, some measurement tools, some electrical tools, and I keep parts and things for the 3D printer as well. So this is kind of like my CNC section of the shop back here. I've got the laser, I've got the computer that runs the laser, and I've got the computer that runs the plasma cutter, and then inside the toolbox I have all the associated tools and parts and materials that are necessary for fabricating or using those tools. Okay, all right, so over here in the back corner of the shop, we have what feels like the permanently broken plasma cutter, CNC table here in the corner. But if you want a lot of details about this plasma cutter, there are a bunch of other videos about it, including the entire construction, the coding, and everything else that need to be done to build this. So you have some specific details about this. I would reference some of those other videos. All right, so over here on this wall of the shop, I normally only have my little sheet metal cart back here. I keep all my excess sheet metal here. That way it can easily be put on the plasma cutter or dragged over to the welding table for whatever I need. Up above it, I have my corded reel for my electricity, and then I have my corded wheel for my airlines. In front of this, I do temporarily have this Chevy 350 small block sitting here. This is going to be used in a future project. Matt had it and he gave it to me for nothing. And so this is going to be used eventually, but I had nowhere else to put it, so it went right here. Next to the sheet metal, I have the Prusa 3D printer sitting here in that enclosure that I made. And again, if you want some specific details on this or want to see this thing in action, you can reference my other video where I put this together and built the enclosure for this 3D printer. All right, so the last two tools I have in my shop here is my 20-ton Harbor Freight press. I have swapped out the jack on it from the original hand jack to use an aero hydraulic jack, also from Harbor Freight. And then down below it, currently posted here, I have my Swag Off-Road finger brake. Again, not a tool I use very often. This whole press system doesn't get used too much, but it's a super useful tool to have. And when you hit the point where you need it, there's really no other option other than a tool like this. So both the Swag brake and also the whole 20-ton press are very useful tools for the shop. Below it, again, temporarily stored, I've got a 4LE transmission. Again, that was from Matt. It'll get used in a future project, but for now it just sits in front of the 20-ton press, again, because I don't use it very often. Next to the press, I have my Barrel Blaster Sandblaster. That's this red barrel here. This is another great tool. I use this mostly just for cleaning off metal parts prior to powder coating to give them a nice clean finish. This thing's made in Texas. You can order it on their website if you really want one of them. I've not done a video where I've used this thing yet, but this thing is a really good tool and super nice to have. Again, it's one of those things that when you need it, and there really is no substitute for it. And so I just kind of keep it up here, kind of out of the way from the rest of the fabrication space. And when I need either of these two tools, they're right there and they're available to be used right away. Go. All right, guys, I hope y'all liked that. Again, the whole point of this video was just to give a quick tour of my home fabrication shop. I want y'all to see that you really don't need a whole lot of stuff to do a lot of the different projects that we do working on trucks out here at our homes. This is not a super fancy shop. Sure, I've got a plasma cutter and some other CNC machines, but again, this is not a very fancy shop, and I didn't collect all these tools right away. It took me many years to build up this collection and to build this shop to the point where it's at currently. But anything is possible if you just take your time and you have fun with it. I hope you guys liked the video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.